current administration to cover up tactics that they may be ashamed of.
All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. U.S. forces have conducted raids in Somalia and Libya aimed at alleged Islamist militants. On Saturday, Navy SEALs attacked a seaside villa on the coast of Somalia, targeting an alleged senior leader of the Somali group Al-Shabaab. The SEALs reportedly withdrew after an exchange of gunfire that left 7 people dead, none of them on the U.S. side. It was the most extensive U.S. raid in Somalia since 2009. The U.S. initially said the apparent target identified as Ikrima was captured in the raid, but later backed off that claim. An unnamed U.S. official said the operation came in response to the deadly attack on a Kenyan mall last month that killed over 60 people. But according to Reuters, another U.S. official said it's unknown if Ikrima was involved. That same day in Libya, U.S. operatives seized al-Qaeda leader Abu Anas al-Libi from the streets of Tripoli. Al-Libi was indicted in 2000 for his alleged role in 1998 U.S. embassy bombings in Kenya and Tanzania that killed 224 people. There had been a $5 million bounty for his capture. In a statement, the Libyan government claimed it had no prior knowledge of the raid and demanded an explanation for what it called, quote, the kidnapping of a Libyan citizen. The U.S. claims the Libyan government was aware of the operation and provided assistance. Al-Libi is reportedly being held and interrogated without a lawyer on a U.S. Navy ship in the Mediterranean. It's expected he'll be sent to New York City for prosecution in federal court. Speaking during a visit to Indonesia, Secretary of State John Kerry said the U.S. will continue to launch similar operations in foreign countries.
We hope that this makes clear that the United States of America will never stop in its effort to hold those accountable who conduct acts of terror, and those members of al-Qaeda and other terrorist organizations literally can run but can't hide. We will continue to try to bring people to justice in an appropriate way with hopes that ultimately these kinds of activities against everybody in the world
At least 51 people were killed in Egypt Sunday in the continued fallout from the overthrow of Egyptian President Mohamed Morsi. Egyptian forces fired on Morsi supporters as they attempted to march on a pro-military rally in Cairo's Tahrir Square. Overall, at least 268 people were wounded in clashes nationwide. More than 400 supporters of Morsi and the Muslim Brotherhood were reportedly detained. The violence fell on the 40th anniversary of Egypt's war to reclaim the Sinai Peninsula from Israel. In other news from Egypt, 2 hunger-striking Canadians have been released after nearly 2 months in prison, but are now being prevented from leaving the country. John Grayson, a Toronto filmmaker, and Tarek Loubani, a doctor, were freed unexpectedly Sunday morning. Hours later, they were prevented from boarding a flight at the Cairo airport after appearing on a government stop list. The 2 have been in touch with their families and say they're in a safe location as they clear up the red tape for a return home to Canada. Grayson and Dr. Loubani were arrested on August 16th after rushing to the scene of a mass shooting by state forces of supporters of ousted President Mohamed Morsi. They staged a 3-week hunger strike while being kept in a crowded and cockroach-infested cell. Dozens of people were killed in Iraq over the weekend as part of the country's worst spate of violence since 2008. An attack on a Shiite school in northern Iraq on Sunday killed 13 children and left 80 people wounded. On Saturday, at least 48 people were killed when a suicide bomber attacked a group of Shia pilgrims. International weapons inspectors have begun destroying Syria's chemical weapons stockpile. It's the first step under the UN resolution that followed the August 21st attack in Ghouta and threats of a U.S. military strike. The Assad regime faces a deadline of mid-2014 to abandon its full chemical arsenal. Speaking today in Indonesia, Secretary of State John Kerry welcomed the initial progress.
I think it's also credit to the Assad regime for complying rapidly, as they are supposed to. Now, we hope that will continue. I'm not going to vouch today for what happens months down the road, but it's a good beginning, and we should welcome a good beginning.
The U.S. and Russia say they hope to convene an international peace conference on Syria in about a month. Republican leaders are refusing to back down in their campaign against Obamacare as the partial federal government shutdown enters its 7th day. On Sunday, House Speaker John Boehner rejected calls to allow a vote on a government funding bill without tying it to undoing President Obama's health care law. The White House has argued a so-called clean measure would have enough votes from Democrats and moderate Republicans if Boehner would allow it to reach the floor. On Saturday, the House approved a measure to pay the nation's 800,000 furloughed federal workers retroactively, but only when the government reopens. In a rally on the U.S. Capitol, a group of furloughed workers said they're struggling to provide for their families.
This is devastating to both of us. Our son is 4 years old. We had to take him out of daycare immediately because we knew that that would not be an expense that we could meet this month because we don't know how long this furlough could go.
They should give up their paychecks. You know, they should reserve the right to get a paycheck, to know what it feels like to not have the money to provide for your family, to be able to put food on the table, to be able to put gas in your car.
In addition to undoing Obamacare, Boehner and the Republicans are also seeking cuts to programs including Medicare and Social Security in the upcoming debate over raising the debt ceiling. The U.S. faces an October 17th deadline to raise the debt limit or fail to pay off its debts. On Sunday, Treasury Secretary Jack Lew said the shutdown's already causing major damage to the economy.
You know, every day that the government is shut down, it does real harm to the American people. And I think you have to take a step back and look at where we are as a country, as an economy. The American people have been fighting their way out of the worst recession since the Great Depression. The economy is coming back. They don't need politics in Washington to bring the economy down.
The New York Times reports Republicans and right-wing groups have been planning on a government shutdown as part of a strategy to undo Obamacare since President Obama was reelected. Earlier this year, a group of Republicans gathered in an undisclosed location in Washington, D.C., and devised what they called a blueprint to defunding Obamacare. A group linked to the billionaire Koch brothers, Freedom Partners, Chamber of Commerce, gave more than $200 million to anti-Obamacare efforts last year. Vigils were held around the world Saturday to urge the release of 28 environmentalists and 2 journalists facing piracy charges in Russia. The Arctic 30 were detained in a direct action against Russia's first Arctic offshore oil rig last month. The Netherlands has filed legal action against Russia in a bid to win their release. To see more on this story, our interview with Kumi Naidu, head of Greenpeace International, go to our website at democracynow.org. Rallies were held across the United States Saturday in a call for renewed congressional action on immigration. Demonstrators in Phoenix, Miami, Philadelphia, Los Angeles, and other cities came together in what organizers dubbed the National Day for Dignity and Respect. Immigration reform has stalled in the House since the Senate approved a landmark measure in June. In New York City, hundreds of people marched over the Brooklyn Bridge.
I want to become a citizen so that way I can feel like I am a part of this country and I can, pay taxes, go to school, drive, and get a job like everyone else.
I'm a dreamer, and if this isn't passed, I probably won't be able to go to college. And, I want to continue my education so that I can one day become a doctor and, give back to society.
The former Vietnamese military general Vo Nguyen Giap has died at the age of 102. Giap was the mastermind behind the Vietnamese military resistance against France and later the United States. Thousands of people gathered in Hanoi today to honor his life. A state funeral is expected next weekend. And the Angola 3 member Herman Wallace has died at the age of 71. Wallace died Friday morning at 5:30 New Orleans time, just 3 days after being released from a Louisiana prison. He spent more than 42 years in solitary confinement. He was suffering from terminal liver cancer. Wallace and 2 others, known as the Angola 3, were placed in solitary following the murder of a prison guard. The Angola 3 and their supporters say they were framed for their political activism as members of one of the first prison chapters of the Black Panther Party. Wallace was freed to the home of a supporter last week after a judge overturned his 1974 conviction. Prosecutors moved to quickly re-indict him, even though he only had days to live. But Wallace died a free man. In a statement, Wallace's attorney said, quote, although his freedom was much too brief, it meant the world to Herman to spend these last 3 days surrounded by the love of his family and friends. One of the final things that Herman said to us was, I am free, they wrote. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.